Hi again then guys, and welcome to another split style review like we did with the Subaru BRZ and Toyota 86 a couple of days ago. This time though, for a car which was, you could say, the most unfortunate of the most recent addition of cars to the game, and that is of course the newer, slightly newer, that is Clio RS. Now of course I predicted that this was going to be the Megane RS. I thought it looked lower and wider than a Clio. It would have been more interesting, I think, to have that Megane. Instead, it would have been a pretty cool addition, actually. But what we got instead was a car which, let's be honest, straight off the bat, is pointless. There is no good reason to add this car to the game. I don't care if you're a fan of it, if you're against the game, whatever. You've got to admit, this was not a necessary addition. With the Subaru, you can make the argument that it allows Subaru players to enjoy that same essential car. By all means, I said that in the review. On this occasion, you don't even have that advantage because it's still just a Renault, so it literally makes no difference. However, what differences are there, if any, between the cars themselves? Now, of course, some of you guys in numerous comments since the pack was released have dropped little nuggets here and there that there actually are some differences between the cars. Now, as far as the visuals go, first of all, there are some minor differences, and to be honest, I will give the newer car favour in this regard, because from the front end in particular, the driving lights, if you will, the LEDs at the bottom are different. That's probably the most noticeable visual difference between the two cars, and I actually prefer the new one because the old car has fairly generic looking LED strip lights like an Audi, or like Audi did before everyone else was doing that, whereas the newer one actually has a pretty cool little design where the LEDs look like the checkered flag of the RS logo. That's actually pretty cool. I do like that. It still doesn't justify the car, but of course it is cool. Now, as far as the performance side of things, that is where it gets very interesting, because this is not as boring a review as you might think. And on that point, if you did click on this video, thank you, because it's certainly not the most enticing one of the pack. That's kind of why I left it for last, along with the Subaru BRZ. However, there are differences. Now, the main difference that most people notice is a disadvantage in favour of the newer car, because one is 2015, basically, one is 2016. Not exactly a huge amount of difference there either. At least it could have been like 2014 to 2017, but whatever, that's the one they went for. The newer car, though, is heavier. The older model, the 2015 that we already had, only weighs 1,179 kilos. The newer car weighs 1,204. That's about 25 kilos more. In fact, it is 25 kilos more. That's not a good start. The price is the same, 35 grand. The engine is the same, a 1.6 litre, 216 horsepower, 207 pound-feet, and of course, because the weight is slightly different, the horsepower per tonne is different as well. But it's also in favour of the older car that we already had. That car puts out 183 horsepower per tonne, the new car 179. So this is not looking good so far. Not only did they give us another duplicate that we didn't need, but it's worse than the original. So why am I reviewing them both? Surely I could just say that and have done with it. Well, this is where it gets good. The newer car is better, but it's only better when you tune them. But unfortunately, of course, balance of performance basically cancels that out. However, bear with me, because it's when you upgrade both cars to their maximum that you actually see the differences, because this is where, more often than not, the newer car actually is better. Now, listen to this. The engine, of course, remains a 1.6 litre, but the fully tuned power on the 2015 model is 316. The newer car has 340. That's a pretty decent difference. As far as torque, the older car has 302 pound-feet, the newer one 325. Again, a good difference. And here's the interesting kicker. As far as weight, it's still not as good as the older car, but when tuned, it actually narrows the gap, because the older one weighs 1,049 kilos, the newer one weighs 1,059, so it goes from being 25 kilos heavier to only 10 kilos heavier when both of them are fully tuned. And the horsepower per tonne actually goes from being worse on the newer car in stock form to better when tuned, because it has so much more power. The new car has 321 horsepower per tonne, the older model 301, so a 20 horsepower advantage. So that's kind of ironic. The newer car is categorically worse in its stock form because it either equals the old one or it's heavier, so not great. But then when tuned, the newer one has more power, more torque, and more horsepower per tonne, and actually closes the gap as far as weight. But what about in practice? Because that is probably an interesting thing that many of you guys didn't know before, because I mean, why would you even want to? It's not your first priority. That's why I make these videos, so you don't have to. But when you actually drive them, unfortunately, it once again makes the newer car kind of pointless, because around the 5-minute mark in this video, or at least the marker on the map where you get to, at around 5 minutes with this car, the older car was 2 seconds quicker with its fully tuned form. In fact, both of them were in their fully tuned form that I just mentioned, same tyres, same gearbox. In fact, I even used the exact same tuning settings on both cars as well, and the older one was still 2 seconds quicker. So ultimately, it's an unfortunate occasion because I don't want to be bashing on Polyphony for adding a car like this. I thought we'd got past this, but for now, it doesn't seem to be the case. There was no good reason to add this second car. Is it better in some ways? Yes, when tuned, but even then, as I mentioned earlier on, and doubtless, as you guys thought of as well, balance of performance makes it such an irrelevant advantage, really. It's cool on paper, but it has no real use. So ultimately, you're better off going with the original. It's the same price, the spec is similar, but the older 2015 model is the quicker of the two. 2 seconds by the 5-minute mark is no small margin, especially when the cars are this similar. So overall, it's certainly worth checking out from a hot hatch point of view, but the new one, unless you specifically love it or if you win it, you could definitely give it a miss. Hopefully, they don't do this too often, because the fact that this one stands out so much is a good thing. It's not good that it happened, but it's good that it stands out, because that tells you something, and that is that it doesn't happen as often. That's why it makes much more of an impression when it does, whereas on Gran Turismo 6, it was just the ongoing joke of how many skylines there were. Thankfully, it's not like that yet, but hopefully they'll keep it going in the good direction of having interesting cars rather than repetitive ones like this. Ultimately though, as I said, it's worth checking out as a hot hatch. Just pick which one you want to go for, basically. But that's it for this pick, of course. I'll see you guys next time, and for now, as always, thanks for watching.